Hey, welcome to SI Now. It's Tuesday. It's Halloween. Our costumes will make an appearance later on in the show. You're going to have to wait for it, but we have serious NFL matters to get to. Trades flying in from all corners of the league. Albert Breer from the MMQB is here. Of course, Robin Lundberg here. The latest is the Dolphins. They're coming off a shutout, Albert, against the Baltimore Ravens. They have traded running back Ajayi for a fourth-round pick to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, how much better did the Eagles just get with this trade?
Well, I think the big thing here is it allows them to manage their running back situation a little bit differently, where now they can put LeGarrette Blount in the role they envisioned for him initially. They've fallen into the trap the Patriots fell into last year, where you start using him on first and second down. It's like, okay, well, we want to use him here, we want to use him there. And he's on the wrong side of 30. And so I think bringing in Ajayi allows you to move LeGarrette Blount into the role that you envisioned for him initially, which was short yardage, goal line, and then fourth quarter closer. And so I think this makes the Eagles better. It also should help you from an offensive line standpoint. You lose Jason Peters there. Certainly having a running back of that caliber helps you in pass protection, helps you at least keep the defense a little bit honest.
You mentioned the Patriots. They made the big trade yesterday. Yep. Jimmy Garoppolo going to the 49ers. Why now? Because it had felt like, to some, the window to trade Garoppolo had passed. Why is he no longer the heir apparent to Brady?
The reason why is because they couldn't get him signed to a long-term deal. And they knew how good their situation was, like we all do. They've got the greatest quarterback of all time, 40 years old, still playing like he's 30. And they had a 25-year-old heir apparent. That wasn't going to last forever. They wanted to try to make it last forever. They went to him, and they tried in the spring, and they tried in the summer to get a long-term deal done. And they were willing to pay him like a starter, in essence carrying two starting quarterback contracts on their books. But they couldn't give him the one thing he wanted, which was playing time. And so I think that the real flaw here for the Patriots is not recognizing this quicker, not maybe doing this in March or April when the return would have been greater. I think doing this at the trade deadline makes it harder to get fair value, and you see that with the return. And I thought that was really the surprising thing here, was that it's only a second-round pick coming back. I think they could have gotten a lot more than that if they'd put him on the block in the spring. But at that point, there was still the idea, we're going to find a way to keep Garoppolo here. We don't know what Brady's going to look like at 40 years old. We want to collect more data on what Brady looks like. And while they were trying to negotiate the long-term deal, and while they were collecting data on what Brady looks like at 40 years old, I think that trade value was really affected because, again, in March and April, you've got more suitors out there. It was a bad draft class for quarterbacks. It was a bad free agent class for quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo was still at the front end of the last year of his rookie deal. All those circumstances changed when you waited, and I think by waiting, they cost themselves some capital there.
So who won this trade, or who would you put as the early winner of this trade?
It sounds crazy because the Niners are 0-7 or 0-8. 0-8.
0 and however many games they played.
0-8, and the Patriots are 6-2 and coming off their fifth Super Bowl win. But I love what the Niners did here. Not only do you get a player who fits what you want to do, and I think that Jimmy Garoppolo does fit what Kyle Shanahan wants. You didn't break the bank to get him. And so now you can either pay him now, or you can wait and give him a half-season audition. But by trading your second-round pick for him, I mean, that's what the Jets gave up for Christian Hackenberg. That's not it's not like they can't turn around and then maybe go make a run at Kirk Cousins or draft Sam Darnold in the spring if it doesn't work out. And so now they've got the option, we can wait, or we can lock them up long-term. We've got, what's really great about this from the Niners' perspective is that they've got a potential franchise quarterback in the building now, but they've maintained their flexibility at the position. They didn't sell out to go and get him. Now, once he signs a contract, that all changes. But for right now, they come out of this. They've still got 4 picks in the first 3 rounds in April. They've got over $100 million in cap space in 2018. And again, they retain that flexibility at the position where if they're iffy on it coming out of this year, they've still got they can still throw another dart at that dartboard.
Now, you mentioned the Patriots couldn't keep their good situation forever, but their situation remains good, and it seems like Tom Brady is going to be good forever. What does this mean from their perspective? They expect him to continue playing? How do they get the next guy in line? And does Belichick's timeline perhaps coincide with Brady's?
They're telling you right now that they're buying. That's the big takeaway is that, they traded Jacoby Brissett in September. Now they trade Jimmy Garoppolo. They've literally, now this won't last for more than a couple days, but for right now, they literally don't have another quarterback on the roster. So they're telling you, the avocado ice cream, the pliability. They're buying it. They're all in on it, and we believe that he can play well into his 40s. And when I talk to people in that organization earlier this calendar year and in the years before this one about this, the one thing that they'd always say to you is, we believe in him as a person, but there's no precedent here. Like there's no evidence that somebody can do this. I mean, somewhere along the line, clearly, you make a move like this, it looks like you've bought in.
Yeah, we'll wait to see if maybe the Patriots are in on this 2018 draft class, which people are expecting to be so good. So with that, let's talk about the domino effect of this potential trade. Obviously, Kirk Cousins' name is coming up because we thought perhaps he would be rumored to be joining Kyle Shanahan as former offensive coordinator in San Francisco. That contract situation in Washington has been one of the more interesting ones. What do you see as the big dominoes that will now fall because of this Garoppolo trade?
Kirk, you're right, Maggie. Kirk Cousins is absolutely the number one. I think that everyone in the league was expecting that Kirk Cousins was going to wind up at San Francisco 49ers if the Redskins didn't put the franchise tag on him for the third straight year. And so now Cousins is in a little bit of a weird spot because the two logical landing spots for him going into this season were Los Angeles, where Sean McVay is, and Jared Goff's played well enough there where quarterback's not a question for them, and San Francisco, where Kyle Shanahan is. I wouldn't totally rule out that he could wind up there, but certainly Jimmy Garoppolo now has the first crack at being the long-term answer at quarterback there. And so, I think that you asked the question, where is he going to be? Well, this is still a guy who's under 30 years old with, a real resume, like beyond what Garoppolo has, a real resume, and has shown that he can be a very good starting quarterback, a playoff quarterback in the NFL. And so if you're Jacksonville, if you're the Jets, and you look at it and you say, okay, maybe, like the great thing about him is, like, you look at if you're the Jets, you look at it and you say, okay, we're maybe a year or two out. So he can be that guy for you. Or if you're the Jaguars, you say, we're ready to win right now. We've got the defense. We've got the running game. He can be that guy too. And so that's what's unique about Cousins. That's what makes him a little bit different than the rookie quarterbacks, or say you want to go after a Drew Brees or somebody like that. He can be the guy for right now, but he can also be a guy that you build around. He's still young enough to be a guy you build around for a few years.
And what about the draft class? Is this a positive for this 2018 draft class, or is it seen as a negative?
Well, the bottom line is that if those guys, if Rosen and Darnold, and Rosen's hurt right now, but if Rosen and Darnold and Allen come on, finish strong, and prove themselves to be franchise quarterbacks, they're going at the top of the draft no matter what. If there are teams up there that don't need them, San Francisco could be one of them, then those teams will be able to trade out and get a ton back. And we saw it 2 years ago when Jared Goff, Carson Wentz were coming out. The whole thing with those two was, is there a quarterback worth taking first overall this year? Mariota and Winston had gone the year before. Everything you heard, there was no Mariota, no Winston in that year's class. Well, Goff and Wentz put themselves in a position to go 1 and 2, and what winds up happening? Well, Cleveland didn't like Wentz, but they were able to trade out. Tennessee had drafted Mariota the year before; they were able to trade out. So I don't think it has, like, if Rosen and Darnold are worthy of being a first overall pick, if both of them are worthy of that type of position in the draft, they're going to go 1-2. No matter who's picking up there, because if it's a team that doesn't need a quarterback, that team's going to be able to get a lot back trading that pick.
We're listening and seeing you guys on Facebook Live. You're commenting in. This one comes from John, who says, why are the Finns not even in the Cousins talk? 20 years with no QB and no plan to get one.
Well, I guess the guy doesn't like Ryan Tannehill very much.
They tried with Tannehill, that's true.
The question is, Tannehill and Cousins are virtually the same age, so the question is, do you think Cousins is a big upgrade over Ryan Tannehill? I know some people would argue that he would be. They've got the flexibility now. We talked about this when they signed Jay Cutler in August. You look at Tannehill has $0 guaranteed dollars after this year. So they can bail from the contract very easily. Tannehill turns 30 next summer, so you can make the argument he sort of is what he is now. And so you've seen it now, like, this is what he's going to be going forward. And so the Dolphins do have that flexibility where if they wanted to make a move, they could make a move. I still think Gase likes Tannehill quite a bit, and I don't think that he would bail out from the certainty, knowing what he knows about Tannehill, going into the uncertainty of coaching a guy he hasn't coached before.
This guy, Joe, keeps writing back. He said, I'd trade 2 Tannehills for Kirk Cousins.
Well, he's really valuing Kirk Cousins there. Quarterback questions abound, of course, as there almost always is. But the Broncos trounced by the Chiefs, 3 straight losses. Vance Joseph wouldn't commit to Trevor Siemian going forward. What are they going to do with their quarterback position this season and beyond?
As much as anything else, this is about the failure of Paxton Lynch, because, I mean, you not only took him in the first round, you traded up for him. And so the fact that he's not ready is an indictment of that draft pick, because if he is where you projected him to be, there's no question he's better than what the Broncos wheeled out there on Monday night. And I think that to some degree, Trevor had safe harbor until now, because the offensive line hadn't played very well. Well, Vance Joseph said last night, the offensive line was fine. And it's proven by, you look at the numbers, right? Well, C.J. Anderson rushed for 5.2 yards per carry. And so the things around Trevor Siemian were okay last night, and he still threw 3 interceptions. And one of the things that Vance Joseph's got to look at, and this always happens with these teams that are, like heavy defense, like teams that are slanted towards their defense, you have to worry about the defensive players reacting now.
Yeah.
Like when they look at this and they say, okay, you've got guys in their prime like Aqib Talib and Chris Harris and Von Miller and Derek Wolfe, all of these guys either in their late 20s or early 30s who may not have more than a couple more years left together to do it. And that's part of what Vance Joseph has to manage going forward, too. So it's an interesting situation in Denver for sure.
This trade may have fallen under the radar just a little bit, but a day after the Texans and the Seahawks played each other, they traded with each other, and Dwane Brown, the all-pro left tackle, ends up going to Seattle. They get back cornerback Jeremy Lane, also a 2018 fifth-round pick and a 2019 second-round pick. Okay, they got a haul, and I get why the Houston Texans may want to make that move, but Dwane Brown also was a holdout this year.
Yep.
He also was one who commented about Bob McNair after McNair said the inmates are running the prison. He was very upset about that. It was clear from his comments to the media. Was this purely a football trade?
Let me be clear here and say, like, Bill O'Brien, I think, supports all of those guys, right? Like, I think he's got all of those guys' backs. That said, I know it was a factor. I know having to manage this going forward was a factor for the Texans, where how is Dwane Brown going to handle this going forward? They know the sort of pull he has in that locker room. And if he's out on the owner, and this becomes a week-to-week thing, it's something they've got to manage going forward. And so, absolutely. I think that they looked at this as potentially being a problem that they would have going forward. And that's not to say that people in that building are against what he's doing. It's just from a team perspective, and they looked at it and said, you know what, we were pretty good while Dwane Brown was holding out. Deshaun Watson played pretty good without Dwane Brown protecting his blind side. And if the potential for a problem is there and we can get a good return for him, let's do it. Because, and you look at it too, I mean, in bringing in Jeremy Lane, that addresses a weakness for him. They lost Ajayi in the offseason, and they get the second-round pick in 2019. And remember, they don't have a second-round pick this year. They don't have a first-rounder either, but they lost a second-rounder this year in the Brock Osweiler trade. And so now they've got 2 second-round picks in 2019, which helps them building forward.
Now, you talk about one player there. There were a lot of players who were clearly upset.
Yep.
A lot of things going right for the Texans. Do you expect those comments to have an impact on the remainder of their season? McNair's?
No, I think that I think Bill O'Brien and that coaching staff have done a good job of managing some of the things that have been floating around. And I think one thing that helps them, and it's you don't want to trivialize the hurricane, but that team went through a bunch. Like that team went through a lot at the beginning of the year, real life stuff. And so I think that through that you build a little bit of resiliency. And so I think that this is a situation that Bill O'Brien's going to be able to manage. And I think we saw signs of it on Sunday. Yeah, they lost the game, but it's not that they didn't play well. That was 2 minutes left. They've got a chance to win that game. Obviously Russell Wilson does great things at the end to win the game, but you can't say that the team checked out on Bill O'Brien. And I think if it was going to happen, if there were going to be big issues, if there was going to be some sort of explosion, it probably would have happened in the immediate aftermath.
I just wonder if you're going to see players almost take a knee en masse like they did before that game, Texans players, because we know that McNair is obviously one of those hardliners who wants the players to stand. Okay, final one for you, Albert. No, it's a busy day. Zeke Elliott back in court on Monday. A judge denied a preliminary injunction to block his suspension, and for now, Elliott's suspension is on. He cannot play. Of course, the Players Association can appeal this decision. From your understanding, Albert, will Zeke be on the field when they face the Chiefs in Week 9?
The courts are unpredictable, so I can't give you a firm answer on that. Obviously, his recourse now is to go to the circuit court, either file the conventional appeal or request an en banc hearing. Generally, the rule of thumb is the higher court doesn't like to overturn the lower court, but we've seen that happen in NFL cases over the last few years, so it's not like it's completely off the board. This is a problem for the Cowboys because their schedule is tough coming up, and you look at who they've become over the last 5 weeks. Well, they've scored at least 28 points in each of their last 5 games. They've been in the 30s or 40s in their last 4 games, and they've only gone 3-2 over that stretch. Clearly, because they've got a young defense, this is a team that needs to score a lot to win. And so the timing of the suspension isn't great. And again, I just, I say what I usually, I've covered so many of these things at this point. The courts are very, very unpredictable. And a lot of times it can come down to the whim of one judge or another judge when it's at that level.
Yeah, you mentioned their schedule. They host the Chiefs at Falcons, home to the Eagles, home to the Chargers, and then Washington. It doesn't get any better from there.
Not an easy November.
Albert Breer from the MMQB. Thank you, Albert. Appreciate it.
You got it.
Okay, we're going to be talking NBA in just a moment, but first, SI is releasing their college basketball rankings today. Here is a look at our top 10.
It's not March yet, but college basketball season is set to bring the madness. Here are SI's top 10 teams for the 2017-18 season. Expect Florida to rain down three-pointers, especially junior guard Kevon Allen. This season, Coach Mike White isn't worried about the offense, but he's hoping to add some D to the threes. In Louisville, interim coach David Padgett takes over for the deposed Rick Pitino. Although top recruit Brian Bowen is suspended due to the FBI investigation, the Cardinals still return a talented roster, led by senior point guard Quentin Snyder. Kentucky only has one returning rotation player, sophomore forward Wenyen Gabriel, but they reloaded with another top recruiting class. With coach John Calipari at the helm, the kids are all right. Mississippi State transfer Malik Newman joins the Jayhawks backcourt alongside Devontae Graham. In Bill Self's guard-friendly system, look for the Newman-Graham duo to become a devastating 1-2 punch. Cincinnati returns 3 starters from a team that won 30 games for just the second time in school history. This year, the Bearcats have enough balance to play with anyone. Villanova suffered from a shrunken bench in 2017, but 2018 should see a return to form. Expect Jay Wright to pick up the pace with a fresher team and try to replicate Nova's 2016 title run. Usually a giant slayer, Wichita State starts this season as one of the big boys. The Shockers have a premier perimeter with the returning duo of guard Landry Shamet and wing Marcus McDuffie. Duke is number 3 on our list, but number 1 in the coach's preseason poll, on the backs of senior shooting guard Grayson Allen, a stable of 5-star freshmen, and of course, a legendary coach aiming to avenge an early tournament exit. Sophomore guard Miles Bridges, an NBA lottery prospect, made a surprise return to Michigan State. Can the preseason Player of the Year lead Sparty to a second championship for Tom Izzo? Finally, Arizona takes SI's top spot. Coach Sean Miller is trying to finally make the Final Four. Alonzo Trier and top 3 recruit DeAndre Ayton should help him get over the hump, and possibly to a title.
College basketball begins November 10th, and Sports Illustrated has released their rankings. All Division I men's basketball teams. That's 351 teams are ranked. Now, how did we do it? We used a very complex system. We don't use a vote. We don't use the eye test. Dan Hanner, a PhD economist, has come up with this method, and he joins us now. Okay, Dan, tell us, how do you make up this model, and why do you think it's a better predictor than others out there?
Yeah, so, 10 years ago, the most complicated thing anyone did to calculate how a team would do would be calculate returning minutes. And then we started to do more complicated things. We'd account for how efficient the returning players were, or whether they were good at blocking shots, things like that. But it was still very frustrating to be in this returning minutes model. And this is the world that we have, because clearly, how players fit into a lineup and how they fit into a context is very important. We're going to release something on SI.com later this week talking about Marvin Bagley. And what if he hadn't gone to Duke? What if he had gone to Kansas or Arizona instead? And what you can see is that if he had gone to Kansas and joined a team that doesn't have very many post players, he would have had a huge impact. Whereas if he'd have gone to Arizona, a team that has Dusan Ristic and has DeAndre Ayton, he would have had less of an impact. And so, to try and overcome this, we basically went to doing what every other major league does, is to project every single Division I player and then project the lineup for every Division I team, and then together use that information to basically project how teams will do over the course of the season. And I want to say one of the key things we've added a lot in recent years is even AAU statistics to help project college basketball players, which really help us sort out what a freshman will do when they haven't been on the court before. You want to compare somebody like Mo Bamba of Texas to Colin Sexton of Alabama. Bamba was a very passive shooter on the AAU circuit, but he was a great rebounder, a fantastic shot blocker, whereas Colin Sexton used 40% of the shots when on the floor for his AAU team. He's very aggressive, going to be an instant impact scorer. And so even floating in these AAU statistics, in addition to college stats and the impact of the coach, really gives us a sense of how good these players are going to be and how good the team is going to be overall.
When it comes to that AAU data, how much more reliable is it than, say, high school statistics?
It's much more reliable than high school statistics. The issue with high school statistics is that the level of competition is often very, very different. Someone will be dominating simply because they're physically, stronger, physically taller, physically more athletic than their competition. The AAU circuit at least brings in a group of players who have, some athleticism, some ability, and they play a good, 20 games against one another, against a number of different teams. Certain statistics like rebounds tend to be much more predictive than others. But, just looking at the AAU data over recent years, it's starting to become a bigger and more reliable factor in terms of how freshmen will do.
Let's talk about some of those freshmen. Duke is expected to basically be run by Grayson Allen and a bunch of first-year guys. Kentucky always has a lot of freshmen. So tell us, do you think either of these freshman classes will be good enough to lead their respective teams to titles? Sort of how do they stack up against predominantly freshman-laden teams from years ago?
Yeah, so, it's always difficult when you have a freshman team to be sort of dominant from beginning of the season to the end. There's going to be some growing pains that you go through along the way. We think Duke is certainly in a much better position. They've got 4 players who were, top 12 recruits. They have Grayson Allen, who is a veteran scorer who's going to be there even if some of the freshmen are not ready. Whereas we have Kentucky a little bit lower. I think certainly the scouting from their practices has been that they lack some scoring punch, particularly on the perimeter. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to generate shots. But if you look at it, don't count out freshman-led teams. Since John Calipari enrolled at Kentucky, there have been 7 teams that have given over 50% of their minutes to freshmen. 2 of those 7 teams have won a national title.
Now, Arizona is number 5 in the coaches poll. You have them at number 1. Why is that?
Yeah, and I think this really comes down to the FBI investigation. We're sort of evaluating Arizona based on who's on their roster now, and a lot of people are shading them down based on fears that certain players will be suspended. Certainly we simulate the season. We try and take into account the possibility that someone could miss some time. And Arizona has great depth. Players like, Dylan Smith, who averaged 13.5 points a game for UNC Asheville as a transfer who came in. And we think he's just going to be a role player for Arizona because they have so much depth. So, certainly that's a factor. But clearly if, someone significant like, Alonzo Trier or DeAndre Ayton were to be suspended, that would drop Arizona a lot. But I think even if you talk to people who voted in the poll and they say, look at Arizona's roster as it stands right now, they're definitely a team that could win a national title.
Dan, give us a sleeper team that you expect to do very well this year that perhaps others are overlooking.
So sort of a little bit deeper sleeper is Central Florida with 7'6" Taco Fall and adding a really wonderful transfer class around him to really make UCF be a tournament team for the first time in over a decade. But at the top of the rankings, the team that I think most people acknowledge will be good, but just don't have quite high enough is Cincinnati. This could be the best Cincinnati team in about 20 years. They have a front line of Evans and Clark and Washington, Jerron Cumberland, who's expected to break out. It's Justin Jennifer, who was fabulous as a sophomore last year. His efficiency has started to improve. And so there is a lot of depth and quality to this Cincinnati team than most people expect.
Dan Hanna, really appreciate all of your hard work, your exhaustive work on these rankings, and appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
You bet.
The NBA season started earlier in October this year, so by Halloween, we've seen every team play a handful of games. To go over the early season stories, we're joined by the editor of The Crossover, Matt Dollinger. Matt, we'll start with which team should be, since it's Halloween, scared of its start?
I'm legitimately worried and maybe a little bit scared for the Cavaliers. Obviously Cleveland is used to kind of figuring things out and getting it together in the playoffs. It's silly to worry about LeBron James in October, but the makeup of that Cavaliers team presents some obvious obstacles. There are so many veterans. There are so many guys used to being the man. It's a lot of egos. It's really tough to figure out, how are these guys going to be happy playing 18 minutes a night? Are they going to be happy being the fourth option on the floor? I think the Cavaliers have the toughest coaching job of any in the league, and Ty Lue has his hands full, but I think any other coach would have his hands full too.
Forgetting ego, what about age? I mean, they look old and slow on the perimeter to me. I think it's a combination of it being the early season. I don't have any worries about LeBron, of course, and maybe he can pull them through the East, though Boston looks good. But they have a problem, I think, with the composition, considering the lack of foot speed on the outside.
Yeah, they look great on paper. There's all those big names. But then all of a sudden, when Derrick Rose is actually your third leading scorer, things are pretty bad. Yeah, so... LeBron and Kevin Love have been great. There's no problems there. But the rotations, the lack of speed on the perimeter, like you said, the Cavaliers have a bottom 5 defense right now. We knew their defense wasn't going to be good, but it has to be at least average. And right now, they're just not getting the effort they need.
Are you scared for OKC's start? Been a little bit uneven, a little up and down?
I don't think I'm as scared for them, just because they knew going in, meshing, Carmelo and Paul George with Russell Westbrook is not going to be easy. So to be 500 through 6 games, I think that's pretty predictable. Cleveland, on the other hand, they probably thought, look at these teams we're playing to start the season. This is going to be easy. Even if we struggle, it's still the East. Well, you're losing to the Magic and the Knicks. So all of a sudden, it's not looking so easy. So, they need a coach who can handle that team. And it could be Ty Lue, but I think, any coach could be put in that situation right now and would struggle.
What about ghosts? It is Halloween. Let's talk about them. Which ghosts do you think currently haunt their own team?
All right, well, this take might haunt me a little bit, but I think...
We're recording.
Thank you. The ghost of Dirk Nowitzki is haunting the Dallas Mavericks, and I know he's still there, but that's the problem. The Mavericks really probably should have parted ways with Dirk Nowitzki 2 years ago, but he won them a championship. There's so much loyalty in that franchise. They wanted to do right by Dirk, so they gave him a huge contract. They said, yeah, play it out. We'll rebuild on the side while you kind of do your thing the last couple days. That's not working at all. Dirk has looked significantly slower this season. He's averaging only around 10 points per game. He's taking less shots than J.J. Barea right now. The Mavericks are not going to win like this. I like that they're standing by their guy and, doing right by Dirk, but the whole franchise is going to suffer a couple years because of it.
The end of Dirk Nowitzki is somewhere between the end of Tim Duncan and the end of Kobe Bryant.
Yes.
Somewhere in that middle ground.
I know, but the end of Kobe Bryant was a very expensive ending.
Yeah.
The end of Duncan was expensive. Dirk Nowitzki's making $5 million a year. Can he really be haunting them when he makes so little?
Yes, because they can't fully embrace the rebuild. I mean, this is a team that should be playing extremely fast. They're a guard-dominated team, but when you have Dirk Nowitzki on the floor, you change your whole offense. You play around him, and that doesn't work right now. You cannot play around a 38-year-old, post player anymore.
Not to belabor this.
Yeah.
They've won one game. Are we sure they're not tanking?
That's a better way of looking at it, honestly. You're right. They could be, but the fact is they've got veterans on there like Harrison Barnes and Wes Matthews, so it's a strange tanking job. If it's an accidental tank, it's a blessing in disguise.
Now for some NBA trick-or-treat. The Knicks have won 3 straight, in large part due to Kristaps Porzingis, who scored a career-high 38 points in a win over the Nuggets, making him our adrenaline performer, presented by Toyota. KP has 5 30-point games in the first 6 contests, the first Knicks player ever to do so. Porzingis had scored 30 or more in 3 of his 138 games prior to this year, but is now averaging 29.3 points, 8.3 boards, and 1.7 blocks for the 500 Knicks and hearing MVP chants at the Garden. The question is, the recent Knicks hot streak. Trick or treat.
Oh, it's the ultimate trick. First of all, I can't believe Phil Jackson didn't trade this guy. I mean, get him out of New York. What's he doing here? No, it's a trick. Listen, the Knicks, they're playing in the East, as we said earlier. It's a joke of a conference. They can definitely get by. Porzingis isn't dropping 38 a night. But here's why I think the Knicks are a treat, but they're not going to be so bad this year. The narrative on the Knicks is they're a rebuilding team. It's not true. This is a veteran team. You look at all the guys that are actually playing: Enes Kanter, Jarrett Jack. The list goes on. These are veterans. These are guys used to being in the league. So while Porzingis is young, Tim Hardaway Jr. is young, he still played some minutes. This is a team that should be winning games like this. That said, if anyone thinks the Knicks are going anywhere this year, I've got some candy corn you also might be interested in.
You know, I projected the Knicks to be bad as well, but let me play Dolan's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
That's scary.
The best way for them to make the leap is if Porzingis were to make the leap, because if you look at young players around the league, and I've thought if he's in the right system, he has a chance to be a top 5 guy. Yeah. You pair him with Ntilikina, who I've been impressed with defensively with some length. He looks up when he's playing offensively, maybe needs to score a little bit more. Yeah. And then Hardaway Jr., who can score. Is there a chance they're better than we gave them credit for because Porzingis does make that jump earlier than we might have thought?
Here's my concern with what we've seen from Porzingis so far is he ran into the wall the last couple of years. He got beaten down, and he's taking 28 shots a game, playing 38 minutes a night, something like that. He's going to wear out quickly. I mean, we've seen him go through a little bit of a physical transformation since entering the league, but he's still a really skinny guy. He's still, one of those guys that's working on their body on a daily basis. So I don't think he has the physical stamina to kind of carry this load through a whole season, but you see what he can do in these flashes, and you're absolutely right. Like, this guy is a franchise player. If he's ever able to get some help around, his team, the Knicks could be a legit playoff team, but I don't trust James Dolan. Do you?
Yeah. Dolan's advocate. I don't know about that. Let's talk more about the Eastern Conference, shall we? The Pistons and the Magic both sitting very high towards the top of the conference. Is that a trick or a treat?
I think the Pistons are a little more of the treat here. I'm getting the trick or treat mixed up a little bit. They're more of the treat. The Magic have really benefited from just catching some sleeping teams so far, and they're shooting ridiculous percentages from the field. Aaron Gordon shooting almost 60% from three-point range. This is not going to last. But it is fun to see Orlando play some winning basketball. They've had such a tough time making their lottery picks translate to wins the last couple of years. It's nice to see them have a little ray of sunshine. As for Detroit, Stan Van Gundy's team was just awful last year, and I couldn't kind of see them playing the same way for a second straight year. So I'm not surprised to see some life out of them. I think that they're more of a pesky defensive team that could hang around the lower tier of the playoffs in the East.
We've talked about the Magic. We talked a little bit about the Thunder, a guy who played for both of those teams, Victor Oladipo, now averaging 25 in Indiana. Is that a trick or a treat?
I think that one, now obviously as an Indiana grad, for all those people who obviously know that, a little biased, but I think that is actually going to be a treat because the Pacers need someone to score. Darren Collison should not be a primary ball handler on any NBA team. Victor Oladipo is a guy you can turn the keys over to and see what he can do. And people are finding he can create. He didn't really get a chance to create much playing next to Russell Westbrook. This is a guy who should not be posted up on the three-point line waiting for the ball. He's a guy who needs the ball in his hands or needs to be cutting to the rim. And, I think that in Indy, he's going to get that chance. Is he a number one option on a contender? No, but on a team fighting to make the playoffs in the East, he's a pretty good option.
Sabonis is playing pretty well, too. Did the Pacers trick all of us with that OKC trade that everyone said was so terrible?
This may be indicated that maybe we shouldn't be grading NBA trades 10 minutes after they happen, but
are you crazy?
Devil's advocate, traffic is good for websites.
Yeah, that's pretty good. No, the Thunder and the Pacers, as we sit here today on this Tuesday, same record.
Same record, right, exactly. Now, let's check back in 2 months. I'm sure that won't be the case, but I think the Pacers did well. Look at Eric Bledsoe in Phoenix. They're going to get nothing for him. Zero, nothing. Pacers might have gotten 2 potential starters for the next, 5-7 years. So it was easy to slam them at the time, but I think they ultimately made a good trade.
Matt Dollinger, editor of The Crossover. He's scared for the Cavs, who may not look like a great team on the court, but off the court, they look good, at least for Halloween.
You did it. You finally got me in a costume. The Night King. I borrowed this from Robin's family. I'm the dragon. All right, Robin, Night King. Your favorite athlete Halloween costume of all time is who?
I'm finding it difficult to breathe.
You're also freaking me out.
Well, my favorite athlete costume came recently. It was Russell Westbrook and Nick Collison with their White Men Can't Jump apparel. They did it in tandem. What I like about this, I like the humorous Halloween costumes. Not only does it show team camaraderie, they coordinated as teammates, but they also coordinated with significant others. So this was just well done all across the board, reminiscent of a Westbrook triple-double. They checked all the boxes.
Okay. Oh, man. Yeah, double date. Gosh, I absolutely hate wearing costumes. This is really, really bad for me. But I'm going to say
come on. It looks
my favorite, and it's really comfortable, my favorite of all time has got to be Serge Ibaka when he goes as Akeem from Coming to America. Beautiful. Love a man with a sense of humor. Nailed it with the costume and included the mop just to finish things off there. So, Serge Ibaka, my plaid hat goes off to you. You really nailed Eddie Murphy there. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We got into this. Are you just going to wear this the rest of the day?
I might as well. No, I can't breathe.
We're going to go so Robin can get some air. We did it. It's Halloween. We did it all. We got into the costumes. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for watching. Robin needs medical attention. We'll see you tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. I might just wear this now for fun. It is very comfortable.
It's
of
like
course,
a pajama thing.
Yeah, it is. Stick with SI.com for all the latest news and headlines. And check us out at SI Now Live on Twitter. What's funny is that this is the Robin size. I would never fit into your wife's size.
I wore that in unison with my family, my two children and my wife, to the Museum of Natural History. People didn't know if we were dinosaurs or dragons, but I was happy with both.
Bye, everyone.